The stars outside the observation window burned cold and distant. Fleet Commander stood with his 4 arms clasped behind his back. His scales, dark blue like deep ocean water, reflected the light of 1,000 suns. He was tall, even for a. His eyes, all 6 of them arranged in 2 rows across his face, watched the empty space with the patience of a predator. Behind him, the command deck of the Dominion flagship hummed with activity. Officers moved between stations. Screens flickered with data streams. The air carried the sharp smell of recycled oxygen and metal. This was the heart of the war machine. From this room had commanded the conquest of 47 species. Each one had fallen. Each one had bent the knee. The Dominion stretched across 3 galactic arms and was its blade. A soft chime announced the arrival of a message. Did not turn. He already knew what it would contain. The Galactic Council had been sending him communications for weeks now, ever since his fleet had begun its patrol along the outer rim. The Council was old. The Council was cautious. The Council had forgotten what it meant to be strong. "Commander," said Lieutenant, her voice carrying the slight tremor of someone who brought unwelcome news. "A priority transmission from the Galactic Council. Classification: absolute." Allowed himself a small smile. Absolute classification, the highest level. The Council must truly be worried. "Display it," he commanded. The main shifted. The seal of the Galactic Council appeared first, a circle of 12 stars representing the founding species. Then the image changed to show the face of Council Speaker, an ancient being whose species had stopped counting their years long ago. His skin was like cracked stone, and his eyes glowed with a tired light. "Fleet Commander," the recording began. "This message concerns the species designated Sol 3 humans. As you are aware, first contact was established 14 standard cycles ago. Since that time, Council observers have been gathering intelligence on this new species. What we have learned has caused us great concern." Watched with growing amusement, the Council concerned, what a rare thing. Attached to this transmission, you will find the complete intelligence dossier on humanity. You will review these files. You will understand why we are sending them, and you will follow our directive without question. The speaker paused, and something flickered in those ancient eyes, something that might have been fear. "Do not engage the humans. Do not provoke them. Do not test them. Observe only. This is not a suggestion, Commander. This is a warning." The transmission ended, stood in silence for a moment. Then he laughed. The sound echoed through the command deck, and several officers looked up with uncertain expressions. "Bring me the intelligence files," ordered. "Let us see what has frightened the Council so badly." The files were extensive. Retired to his private quarters to review them, taking only his most trusted officer with him. Intelligence officer was old for a soldier. His scales had faded to a pale gray, and a thick scar ran across the left side of his face, cutting through 2 of his eyes and leaving them blind. He had served under for 30 years. He had never shown fear in all that time. They sat together in quarters, the data files projected before them in glowing displays. The first files were simple, basic biological information. Humans were bipedal, warm-blooded with internal skeletons. They had 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs. They were laughably short, less than a century for most. Their bodies were soft, without scales or armor. They were weaker than most species in the galaxy, slower than many, smaller than some. "Unimpressive," said, scrolling through the data. "They appear to be prey animals that learn to walk upright." Said nothing. He was watching the files with his 2 remaining eyes, and there was something thoughtful in his expression. The next section contained historical data. The Council's observers had managed to access human information networks and gather records of their past. Expected to find the usual story, a species that had struggled to survive on there before developing technology and reaching for the stars. What he found was different. The humans had spent most of their history at war, not with other species, with themselves. Their planet had been divided into territories, each controlled by different groups of humans. These groups had fought each other constantly. The records showed weapons that grew more terrible with each generation. Explosives, chemical agents, nuclear devices that could destroy entire cities in a flash of light. They fight their own kind, observed. How barbaric, how inefficient. But as he continued reading, his amusement faded. The humans did not fight like the fought for expansion, for resources, for power. When a battle was lost, they retreated. When the cost grew too high, they negotiated. War was a tool, nothing more. Humans fought differently. They fought for ideas, for beliefs, for symbols. They fought even when victory was impossible. They fought even when they were dying. The records showed battles where human soldiers had continued attacking after losing half their number. Wars where entire populations had chosen death over surrender. Conflicts that had lasted generations because neither side would yield. One file caught attention. It was a medical report from a human conflict, translated into the common galactic language. The subject was a soldier who had been shot through the chest. The wound should have killed him instantly. Instead, he had continued fighting for another 30 minutes before collapsing. When medics reached him, they found that he had killed 4 enemy soldiers after receiving the wound. His final words, recorded by a fellow soldier, were simple. "Did we hold the line?" Stared at the report for a long time. A malfunction in the translation, he decided. The data must be corrupted. "It is not corrupted," I said quietly. "I have reviewed the source files. The translation is accurate." The next section was video footage. Played the first file. It showed a human soldier crawling through mud. His legs were shattered, could see the bones sticking through the flesh. Blood trailed behind him like a dark ribbon. Any would have stopped. Any sane creature would have accepted death, but the human kept crawling. In his hands was a weapon, and as watched, the human raised it and fired at targets beyond the camera's view. He fired again, and again. Only when the weapon was empty did he stop crawling. And even then, he did not stop fighting. He pulled a blade from his belt and held it ready, waiting for enemies to come close enough to reach. The video ended. Squatters were very quiet. "Play the next file," he ordered, his voice careful and controlled. The second video showed a medical procedure. A human was lying on a table while surgeons worked on his abdomen. The wound was severe, could see damaged organs through the opening. What caught his attention was not the wound. It was the human's eyes. They were open. He was awake. He was watching the surgeon's work on his own body. "Why is he conscious?" demanded. "Where is the anesthetic?" A note appeared on the screen, a translation of the human medical file. The human had refused sedation. He wanted to remain awake, to watch the procedure, to ensure the surgeons did their work correctly. This was, according to the file, not unusual. Many humans chose to stay conscious during surgical operations. I made a soft sound. It might have been disbelief. It might have been fear. The third video was the worst. It showed a human female, young by their species standards. She was in a burning building. The structure was collapsing around her. In her arms, she carried 2 small humans, children, realized, offspring. The fire had already reached her. Her clothing was burning. Her skin was blistering. But she did not drop the children. She did not stop moving. She ran through walls of flame, her body cooking alive, and she did not stop until she reached a window. She threw the children to safety below. Only then, only after they were safe, did she allow herself to fall. The recording came from the children themselves, taken decades later. Both had survived. They had grown. They had never forgotten what their mother had done. Turned off the display, the room felt smaller than before, darker. "They are insane," he said. "Their species is defective. They feel no pain. They have no survival instinct." "That is not what the data suggests," I replied. He pulled up another file, a biological analysis. "Humans feel pain. Their nervous systems are highly developed. They experience fear, trauma, suffering, all of it." He paused. "They simply choose to continue anyway." "That is impossible." "It is documented." I highlighted a section of text. "Their species evolved on a world that tried to kill them constantly. Predators, natural disasters, disease, starvation. They survive not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most stubborn. They have a term for it in their language. They call it willpower. Stood and paced to the observation window. The stars stared back at him, unchanged. "The council is afraid of stubborn prey animals," he said. "They have grown weak. They have forgotten what true power looks like." "Commander," A's voice was careful, "the council does not issue warnings, they issue commands. When they want something done, they order it. This message was different. They were not commanding, they were pleading." "I heard no pleading." "Then you were not listening." Turned sharply. Any other officer would have been punished for such words, but I had earned the right to speak freely. He had bled for the Dominion. He had sacrificed his eyes for it. "What would you have me do?" demanded. "Run from soft-skinned creatures who live less than a century. Hide from beings who have only just discovered faster-than-light travel. The Dominion has ruled this sector for 10,000 years. We have crushed species far more dangerous than these humans." I was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy. "I have fought in many wars, Commander. I have seen many enemies. Some were strong, some were clever, some were cruel, but I have never seen anything like what those files contain." He gestured toward the now dark display. "A warrior who continues fighting with shattered legs, a patient who watches his own surgery with open eyes, a mother who burns alive to save her children." He shook his head slowly. "These are not the actions of prey. These are not the actions of the weak. These are the actions of something that does not understand how to surrender." "Then we will teach them," said. "We will show them what happens to species who resist the Dominion." He strode to the communication panel and opened a channel to the fleet. Across 12 ships, officers stopped their work to listen. "All vessels, this is Fleet Commander, set course for the Outer Rim. We will be conducting a patrol along the border of human-claimed space. I want full combat readiness by the time we arrive. This is a show of force. The humans are new to this galaxy and they need to learn their place in it." He paused, letting his words sink in. "The Galactic Council has sent us warnings about this species. They believe humans are dangerous. I believe the Council has grown old and frightened. It is time to remind the galaxy that the Dominion bows to no one." He closed the channel. The fleet began to move, 12 warships sliding through the darkness like great metal predators. I remained in the quarters after left to oversee the navigation. He sat alone in the darkness, staring at the blank display screen. After a long moment, he reactivated the files and scrolled to a section he had not shown the commander. It was a psychological profile, compiled by Council observers over years of careful study. The document analyzed the human concept of determination, the ability to continue pursuing a goal despite obstacles, pain, or certain failure. What I read there chilled him to his core. Humans, the report explained, did not see death as an end. They saw it as a price. They would pay that price willingly if they believed the cause was worthy. A human protecting their family would fight until their body physically could not move. A human defending their home would stand against impossible odds without hesitation. And if a human saw their companions threatened, they would become something that the report's authors struggled to describe, a force of nature, unstoppable and relentless. There was more. The report described something called, spite a human emotion that had no equivalent in most galactic languages. It was the desire to continue fighting not because victory was possible, but because surrender was unacceptable. Humans would endure incredible suffering simply to deny satisfaction to their enemies. They would burn their own cities rather than let them be captured. They would destroy their own ships rather than be taken alive. And there was one final observation, marked with the highest priority flag in the Council system. Humans formed bonds with each other that transcended logic or self-interest. They called it loyalty. When a human gave their loyalty to another, they would protect that person even at the cost of their own life. They had traveled across their world, and now across their solar system, to retrieve the bodies of fallen companions. They carried the memories of the dead like sacred treasures. They swore oaths of vengeance that they honored across generations. The report's conclusion was simple: do not give a human a reason to hate you. Do not kill their friends. Do not threaten their families. Do not harm their world. Because if you do, they will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will not accept payment or apology. They will come for you, even if it takes years, even if it costs them everything, even if they have to crawl through the void of space itself. They will keep coming, even while bleeding, even while dying. They will keep coming until one side is destroyed. Closed the file. He sat in the darkness for a long time, feeling the vibration of the ship's engines as they carried the fleet toward human space. He had served the Dominion all his life. He had conquered worlds and broken armies. He had always believed that strength and numbers could overcome any obstacle. Now, for the first time in his long career, he felt something that might have been doubt, something that might have been fear. "We were warned," he said to the empty room. His voice was barely a whisper. "We were warned, and we are not listening." The stars outside continued their ancient dance, cold and indifferent. Somewhere ahead, beyond the rim of known space, a young species was living their lives without any idea that an armada was coming for them. They were mining asteroids, building colonies, raising their children, planning for a future among the stars. They did not know that the Dominion had decided to test them. They did not know that they had been studied, analyzed, and marked as a potential threat. But they would learn, and when they did, when the first shots were fired and the first blood was spilled, the galaxy would discover whether the Council's warnings had been wisdom or cowardice. Suspected he already knew the answer. He suspected everyone would know soon enough. The fleet continued its journey through the endless dark, carrying the seeds of a war that would change everything. Station floated in the darkness between stars like a city made of metal and light. It was not a large station by galactic standards. The had conquered installations 10 times its size without breaking stride. But to the humans who lived there, it was home. 40,000 souls had built their lives in these corridors. Miners pulled valuable metals from the asteroid fields nearby. Engineers kept the systems running. Teachers educated the next generation. Families ate dinner together and watched the stars through observation windows. Commander saw none of this. To him, station was simply a target, a demonstration, a lesson that needed to be taught. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. 12 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their weapons systems powered and ready. The station's defenses were minimal, a handful of patrol vessels, some automated turrets, nothing that could challenge a battle group. "Open a channel," commanded. The communication officer obeyed. A moment later, a human face appeared on the. It belonged to the station's administrator, a gray-haired man whose eyes showed confusion but not fear. He did not understand what he was seeing. He had never seen a warship before. "Unknown vessels, this is station. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Let the silence stretch. He wanted the human to feel the weight of the moment. "I am Fleet Commander of the Dominion," he finally said. "Your station and all vessels in this system are now under Dominion control. You will power down your defenses and prepare to receive our landing forces. Any resistance will be met with overwhelming force." The administrator blinked. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. We've had no contact with your species before. There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake. The Dominion claims this station. You have 1 hour to comply." The channel closed before the human could respond. Turned to his officers with satisfaction. "Prepare the landing craft. I want our flags flying over that station before the day is done." Stood in the shadows at the edge of the command deck. He watched the station on the lights in its windows, the small vessels moving between its docking bays. 40,000 lives, and the commander was treating them like pieces on a game board. "Commander," he said quietly, "perhaps we should wait for their response. Give them time to consider their options." Their options are surrender or death, replied. I see no need for extended negotiation. The landing craft launched. 50 vessels carrying 5,000 soldiers crossed the void between the fleet and the station, expected to receive a surrender transmission before they arrived. He expected the humans to see the overwhelming force arrayed against them and make the logical choice. The hour passed, no transmission came. The landing craft docked at multiple points around the station's outer ring. Soldiers poured into the corridors, weapons ready. They encountered no immediate resistance. The hallways were empty. The lights were dim. There was only silence. Captain led the first assault team. He was a veteran of 12 campaigns, decorated for bravery, known for his efficiency. He had never failed to complete a mission. Something is wrong, his lieutenant whispered. Where are the humans? They are hiding, replied, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Civilians. They have no training for combat. They are cowering in their quarters, waiting for us to collect them. They advanced through the station's main corridor. Their boots made heavy sounds on the metal floor. Emergency lights cast everything in red shadows. Every door they passed was sealed. Then the lights went out completely. Activated his helmet's night vision. The world turned green and gray. Stay together, he ordered. Maintain formation. They reached an intersection and stopped. Something was different here. Raised his hand, signaling his team to hold position. On the wall ahead, someone had written words in the language. The letters were crude but readable. They spelled out a single message. Leave. Stared at the words. The language was complex. It had taken most species years to learn even basic communication. The humans had been in contact with the Dominion for less than a day. How did they? His lieutenant began. A sound came from the darkness. A soft click, like metal touching metal. Turned just in time to see a figure emerge from a maintenance hatch in the ceiling. It was a human, dressed in worker's clothing, face smeared with grease. In his hands was something improvised, a mining tool modified into a weapon. The human's eyes met eyes. There was no fear in them, only cold, focused determination. The human attacked. The first hours were chaos. They were superior in every measurable way, stronger, better armed, better armored. But the humans did not fight like any enemy they had faced before. They emerged from vents and maintenance tunnels. They ambushed patrols in darkened corridors. They used the station's own systems against the invaders, sealing doors to trap squads, venting atmosphere from occupied sections, triggering emergency protocols that filled hallways with fire suppression foam. Lost 3 soldiers before his team reached the station's central hub. Each time, the attack came from nowhere. Each time, the humans vanished before they could respond. And each time, they left a message. Leave. Leave now. We warned you. By the 3rd hour, had lost contact with 2 other assault teams entirely. Their communication signals simply stopped. When he sent scouts to find them, the scouts did not return. Watched the reports from his flagship with growing irritation. This was supposed to be simple, a show of force, a quick submission. Instead, his soldiers were fighting shadows. Send another battalion, he ordered, and tell them to stop being gentle. If the humans want war, we will give them war. 1,000 more soldiers descended on station. This time, they came with heavier weapons. They blasted through sealed doors. They swept through every corridor with overwhelming firepower. They forced the humans out of hiding and into direct confrontation. The first real battle happened in the station's agricultural sector, a vast chamber filled with hydroponic gardens that fed the station's population. A group of humans had gathered there. Not soldiers, not warriors, saw the reports and struggled to believe them. The defenders were miners, engineers, teachers, doctors. They carried improvised weapons, tools, pipes, anything they could find. Some had managed to acquire actual firearms from the station's small security force, but most of them had never held a weapon in their lives. The commander on the ground sent a final surrender demand. He expected the humans to see reason. They were outnumbered, untrained. The logical choice was obvious. The humans' response was to open fire. The battle lasted 27 minutes. They killed dozens of humans in the first wave. They advanced through the gardens, stepping over bodies, pushing toward the human defensive line. They were professionals. They were efficient. They expected the remaining humans to break and run at any moment. The humans did not run. As the first line fell, the second line stepped forward. They did not hesitate. They did not flinch. They simply moved into position and continued firing. Some of them were already wounded from the first exchange. Blood stained their clothing. They kept fighting anyway. A soldier named would later describe what he saw that day. His testimony would be classified at the highest level, shown only to senior commanders and intelligence officers. There was a human female, he said. His voice was flat, drained of all emotion. Middle-aged, I think, a teacher based on her clothing. She had taken a hit to her abdomen during the first charge. Her wounds were severe. I could see inside her. She should have been dead. She should have been screaming in agony. He paused, collecting himself. She was still standing. She was still fighting. She had picked up a weapon from a fallen comrade and she was firing at us, reloading, firing again. I watched her for what felt like hours. I kept waiting for her to fall. She never did. Not until one of our snipers finally put her down. Another pause, longer this time. Before she died, she grabbed one of mine, just grabbed him with her bare hands. He was in full armor. She shouldn't have been able to move at all, but she grabbed him and she held on. She wouldn't let go. He tried to shake her off. He tried to pry her fingers loose. Nothing worked. She held him there while she bled out, and she kept looking at him, looking right into his eyes. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The message was clear. The interviewer asked what message that was. His answer was simple: you should not have come here. The battle for the agricultural sector ended with a victory, but it did not feel like victory. The soldiers who emerged from those gardens were quiet. They did not celebrate. They did not boast of their kills. They moved to the next objective with mechanical precision, but something had changed in their eyes. I reviewed the casualty reports with growing unease. The losses were acceptable by normal standards: fewer than 200 soldiers killed, another 300 wounded. But the pattern of those losses disturbed him. Humans who should have died instantly kept fighting for minutes. Humans who were surrounded refused to surrender. Humans who ran out of ammunition attacked with bare hands. One human, an elderly man with white hair, had charged a squad armed with nothing but a metal chair. He had killed one soldier and wounded 2 others before being cut down. This is not normal, I told. This is not how prey animals behave. This is not how any species behaves. Was unmoved. They are simply too stupid to know when they are beaten. This will end soon. Once their leadership is captured, the rest will fall in line. But the leadership could not be found. The station's administrator had disappeared. The security chief had vanished. Every human who might have had the authority to surrender had either gone into hiding or been killed fighting. On the 4th day, they finally secured the station's control center. It had been rigged with explosives. If the assault team had been 30 seconds slower, they would have been buried in rubble. As it was, 3 soldiers died disarming the bombs. Inside the control center, they found a single human, a young woman, barely more than a child by human standards. She was sitting at a console, her fingers moving across the controls. When they burst in, she did not run. She did not scream. She looked at them with eyes that held no fear, only exhaustion and something that might have been satisfaction. "You're too late," she said. Who had survived the entire assault despite losing most of his team, stepped forward. Too late for what? The girl smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. The message went out 2 days ago. Earth knows what happened here. They know what you did. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes. "They're coming, and they won't stop until they find you." She died there in that chair before the medics could reach her. Her wounds were extensive. She had been fighting for days with injuries that should have killed her. She had stayed alive through sheer will, maintaining the communication systems, ensuring that word of the invasion reached her. Received the news in his quarters. He read the report, then read it again. A child had outsmarted his entire fleet. A dying child had sent a distress call that would bring the full attention of humanity down upon them. "No matter," he said, but his voice was less certain than before. "Let them come. We have 12 warships and 5,000 soldiers. What can they possibly send against us?" A did not answer. He was reading another report, account of human casualties, more than 8,000 dead, nearly a quarter of the station's population. And for what? To slow the invasion by a few days, to send a message. Noah realized, not just to send a message, to make a statement. The humans had known they could not win. From the first moment's fleet appeared, they had understood that resistance was futile. Surrender was the logical choice, the safe choice, the choice that any sensible species would make. But humans, was beginning to understand, were not sensible. They had looked at the impossible odds, at the overwhelming force arrayed against them, and they had decided to fight anyway. Not because they thought they could win, but because surrender was unacceptable, because some things were worth dying for, because they refused to be conquered without making the conquerors pay a price. 8,000 dead. 8,000 people who had chosen to die rather than submit. 8,000 messages written in blood, all saying the same thing. "We are not afraid of you." And now, somewhere across the void, more humans were coming. Humans who had heard what happened. Humans who were not coming to negotiate or to assess or to consider their options. They were coming for blood. I stood by the observation window looking out at station. The fires had been extinguished. The bodies had been collected. Flags flew over the docking bays. It should have felt like victory. It felt like the beginning of something terrible. "Commander," he said quietly, not sure if was even listening, "I have served the Dominion for 30 years. I have seen many species fall before our might, the strong and the weak, the brave and the cowardly. I thought I understood what made the difference between victory and defeat." He turned to face. His face was grim. "I was wrong. These humans, they are different. They do not fight like warriors. They fight like something else, something I do not have a word for." He gestured toward the station. 8,000 of them died here. 8,000 against trained soldiers with superior weapons, and they kept coming, wave after wave, wounded and dying. They kept coming. His expression hardened. They were fools, brave fools perhaps, but fools nonetheless. "Perhaps," agreed. "But Commander, what happens when we face humans who are not fools? What happens when we face their real warriors? If their civilians fight like this, what will their soldiers do?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. In the distance, beyond the range of their sensors, the first human response fleet was already gathering. Ships were being loaded with soldiers and supplies. Families were saying goodbye to loved ones who might never return. And across 100 worlds, humans were watching footage from station, footage of their people dying, fighting, refusing to surrender. They were not sad. They were not afraid. They were angry. And anger, they would soon learn, was the most dangerous human emotion of all. The stars continued their ancient dance, cold and indifferent. But in the darkness between them, something was moving. Something was coming. The humans had received the message. Now it was time for them to send one of their own. The xenobiology laboratory aboard the flagship had been designed to study new species. Its walls were lined with preservation tanks, analysis equipment, and specimen containers. In normal times, it was a place of scientific curiosity. Now it had become something else entirely. Senior stood before her team, her 4 eyes moving between the data displays that surrounded them. She had spent her entire career cataloging the species of the galaxy. She had studied predators and prey, intelligent beings and simple organisms. She thought she understood the nature of life. She had been wrong. "We have completed our analysis of human biology," she announced. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something that might have been fear. "The results are unexpected." The laboratory was crowded with officers. Fleet Commander had demanded a full briefing. He wanted to understand why his soldiers were returning from station with haunted expressions and trembling hands. He wanted to know why trained warriors were requesting transfers, why some had stopped eating, why one had taken his own life rather than return to combat against humans. Activated the first display, a three-dimensional model of a human being rotated slowly in the air. "Physically, humans are unremarkable," she began. "Their bodies are soft compared to most species. They have no natural armor, no claws, no venom. Their senses are limited, their hearing range is narrow, their night vision is poor, and they cannot detect electromagnetic fields. By every standard measurement, they should be a prey species." She paused, letting the words sink in. "They are not." A new image appeared, a diagram of the human brain. It was far more complex than had expected, with densely packed neural structures and intricate connection patterns. Humans evolved on a world called Earth. It is a brutal planet. Extreme temperatures, natural disasters, predators in every environment. Most species would have died out long ago. The humans survived not through physical strength, but through adaptation and determination. She highlighted a specific region of the brain. This structure, which they call the prefrontal cortex, allows humans to plan ahead, to strategize, to override their basic instincts. When a human is afraid, when every fiber of their being screams at them to run, this structure allows them to choose not to. "Many species can overcome fear," said impatiently. "Our own soldiers do it every day." "With respect, Commander, it is not the same," pulled up another display. "Our soldiers overcome fear through training and discipline. We teach them to suppress their survival instincts. Humans do something different. They do not suppress their fear. They acknowledge it, accept it, and then proceed anyway. They have a concept they call courage, the ability to act despite fear, not in the absence of it." She let that sink in before continuing. "But fear is only the beginning. Let me tell you about their evolution." The display changed to show an ancient Earth. Humans, or their ancestors, moved across a savanna landscape. They were small, weak-looking creatures compared to the predators that surrounded them. Humans are what call persistence predators. Most predators rely on speed or strength. They chase their prey in short bursts, and if the hunt fails, they give up and try again later. Humans evolved differently. They could not outrun their prey. They could not overpower it, so they developed a different strategy. The animation showed a group of early humans beginning to follow a large animal. Hours passed, days passed. The humans never stopped moving. They walked at a steady pace, never sprinting, never resting for long. The animal they were chasing grew exhausted. It collapsed. The humans reached it, still walking, and finished the hunt. "They simply did not stop," said. "Their prey would run and they would follow. It would run again and they would follow again. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion while the humans were still moving. This is the fundamental nature of the human species. They do not need to be faster or stronger. They simply refuse to quit." A murmur passed through the assembled officers. Standing at the edge of the group, felt a chill run down his spine. Activated another display. This one showed human medical data, charts and graphs and biological measurements. "Now we come to the most disturbing part of our analysis. What happens when a human is injured?" She highlighted a chemical compound. Humans have a substance in their bodies called adrenaline. When a human is threatened, their body releases massive amounts of this chemical. The effects are remarkable. Their strength increases. Their reaction time improves. And most importantly, their ability to feel pain is dramatically reduced. Images appeared on the screen. Humans from various time periods, wounded in various ways, continuing to function. A human who has been shot can continue fighting for minutes, sometimes hours. Their body literally refuses to acknowledge the damage until the immediate threat is over. We have documented cases of humans with broken bones continuing to run, humans with severe burns continuing to work, humans with wounds that should have killed them instantly surviving long enough to complete critical tasks. Stirred a chemical response. That explains some of what we observed, but surely it has limits. It does, agreed. But those limits are far beyond what any other species can achieve, and the adrenaline is only part of the equation. She brought up a new image, a human heart anatomically detailed. Humans have a phenomenon that we found difficult to believe at first. Their hearts can stop beating. They can be clinically dead by any medical definition, and then be restarted. Sometimes through medical intervention, sometimes through simple physical force applied to the chest. We have records of humans whose hearts stopped multiple times being brought back to life repeatedly. That is impossible, one of the officers said. It is documented, replied. Their medical literature is full of such cases. Humans do not accept death easily. Their bodies seem designed to keep functioning long past the point where death should have claimed them. She took a breath before continuing. But the physical adaptations are not what concern me most. It is the psychological aspects that I believe pose the greatest danger. The display changed again. This time it showed human brain scans, activity patterns, emotional responses. Humans form bonds, said. Deep, intense bonds with other humans. They call these bonds by many names: family, friendship, love. But the result is the same. When a human forms a bond with another being, they become willing to sacrifice themselves for that being's safety. She gestured to a series of case studies. We analyzed human history for examples of this behavior. What we found was overwhelming. Humans have thrown themselves on explosives to save companions. They have starved themselves so their children could eat. They have walked into certain death to buy time for others to escape. This is not rare behavior for them. It is common, expected, normal. Pulled up one final display. It showed a statistical analysis, numbers and percentages scrolling across the screen. We attempted to calculate the probability of a human surrendering in various combat scenarios. The results were troubling. Even in situations with zero chance of victory, where death was absolutely certain, a significant percentage of humans chose to fight anyway. When their loved ones were threatened, that percentage increased to nearly 100%. She turned to face the assembled officers directly. Commanders, generals, soldiers of the Dominion, I want to be very clear about what I am telling you. Humans are not dangerous because they are strong. They are not dangerous because they are smart or fast or technologically advanced. They are dangerous because they do not stop. They do not give up. They do not accept defeat. When you wound them, they keep fighting. When you kill their friends, they swear revenge. When you threaten their homes, they become something that I do not have a scientific term for. She paused. We have a word in the old language. It means one who has already died but does not yet know it. A creature that has accepted death and now fights without fear or restraint because it has nothing left to lose. She gestured toward the displays. Humans can enter this state at will, not through injury or desperation, but through choice. They can decide to die and then fight as though they are already dead. The silence in the laboratory was absolute. Finally spoke, "You are trying to frighten us. You are trying to make us afraid of prey animals." Met his gaze without flinching. Commander, I am a scientist. I do not deal in fear, I deal in facts. And the facts tell me that we have made a terrible mistake. We attacked a human colony. We killed their people. We gave them a reason to hate us. She gestured to the displays one final time. Do you understand what that means? We have created enemies who will not stop, will not surrender, will not accept anything less than victory or death. And they are coming here. The briefing ended in silence. Officers filed out of the laboratory, their faces pale, their eyes troubled. Remained behind, staring at the displays with an expression that mixed anger with something that might have been doubt. Found himself in the ship's lower corridors, far from the command deck. He was not sure why he had come here. Perhaps he needed to be away from the tension that filled the upper levels. Perhaps he needed time to think. He found himself at the entrance to the medical bay. Inside, wounded soldiers lay in rows of beds. Most of them had been injured at station: burns, broken bones, plasma wounds. A few had injuries that it did not recognize. One soldier caught his attention, a young male barely past his coming-of-age ceremony. He was sitting up in his bed, staring at nothing. His scales were pale, his eyes unfocused. He had no visible injuries. I approached. "Soldier, what is your name?" The young male did not respond at first. Then slowly he turned his head. His eyes focused on me as if seeing him from a great distance. He said, his voice was hollow, "My name is." "You were at station?" "Yes." "What happened to you?" Was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I killed a human child, a boy. He could not have been more than 12 standard years. He came at me with a piece of metal, just a broken pipe, nothing that could have hurt me. I shot him. I had to. He was attacking me." Waited. "He did not die immediately. He lay on the ground, bleeding, and he looked at me. His eyes were so clear. There was no fear in them, no anger. He just looked at me and he smiled. His hands began to tremble. He smiled at me and he said something. I do not speak their language well, but I think he said, 'My parents will find you.'" His voice cracked. He was dying, and his last thought was not of himself, not of his own survival. He was warning me, or perhaps threatening me. I cannot tell the difference anymore. I sat down on the edge of the bed. He did not know what to say. In 30 years of service, he had never heard a soldier speak like this. "There is more," continued. "After the boy died, I went back to the main corridor. I found the bodies of the rest of my squad. They had been processed. The humans had taken their weapons, their equipment, but they had also left something." "What?" "Names. The humans had carved names into the walls above each body. Human names. I checked the casualty reports later. Each name belonged to a human we had killed in the previous assault. Looked at it with eyes that held no hope. They are keeping track. They know exactly who we have killed, and they are telling us that they will remember every name, every face, every death." He lay back down and stared at the ceiling. "I cannot sleep," he said. "Every time I close my eyes, I see that boy smiling at me. I hear him telling me that his parents will find me. And I know in my heart that somewhere out there 2 humans are coming for me. They do not know my name yet. They do not know what ship I serve on, but they will learn. And when they do, they will not stop until they find me." I left the medical bay in silence. His mind was churning with thoughts that he did not want to acknowledge. He had spent his entire life believing in the strength of the Dominion, in the inevitability of conquest, in the natural order of predator and prey. Now he was beginning to wonder if they had made a terrible miscalculation. The humans were not prey. They had never been prey. They were something far more dangerous, persistent predators who had turned their endless stamina and unbreakable determination toward war. They were creatures who formed bonds so deep that they would cross galaxies for revenge. They were beings who could look at certain death and smile because they knew that their parents, their friends, their species would finish what they started. I returned to his quarters and pulled up the intelligence files again. He read through them slowly, carefully, looking for something he might have missed: a weakness, a vulnerability, some way to predict or control human behavior. He found none. What he found instead was a human concept that he had not fully understood before. They called it spite. It was the desire to resist, to fight back, to cause harm to one's enemies even at the cost of one's own life. Humans cultivated spite. They praised it. They considered it a virtue in certain circumstances. The implications were staggering. A species motivated by spite could not be deterred by shows of force. Killing their soldiers would not break their morale, it would fuel it. Burning their worlds would not make them surrender, it would make them swear vengeance. Every attack would make them stronger, more determined, more focused on the destruction of their enemies. The Dominion had conquered 47 species, being stronger and more ruthless than their opponents. That strategy worked against rational beings who valued their own survival. It would not work against humans. A closed the files and sat in the darkness of his quarters. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, the human fleet was gathering, coming closer with every passing hour. And anew, with a certainty that settled into his bones like ice, that the Dominion had awakened something terrible. They had been warned. They should have listened. Now it was too late. The only question that remained was how high the price would be, and whether, when the final count was made, there would be any left to pay it. In the distance, invisible and inexorable, the human fleet continued its approach. They had received the news from station. They had watched the footage of their people fighting and dying. They had listened to the final message from a dying girl who had given everything to send them a warning. And they were coming. Even now, commanders briefed their troops. Families said goodbye to loved ones who might never return. Soldiers checked their weapons and prepared themselves for what lay ahead. They were not unaware of the danger. They knew many of them would die, but they were going anyway. Because that was what humans did. They kept coming, even while bleeding, even while dying. They kept coming until the job was done. And for all their strength and all their conquests, had never faced anything like that before. They were about to learn. The human fleet arrived without warning. One moment, the sensors showed empty space. The next moment, 53 vessels dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a coordinated formation that suggested careful planning and absolute determination. Studied the display from his command chair, counting the ships, assessing their capabilities. What he saw should have filled him with confidence. The human fleet was smaller than his own, 53 ships against his 12, but his vessels were larger, more heavily armed, more advanced in every way. Many of the human ships appeared to be civilian vessels hastily converted for war. Others were old military designs, ships that should have been decommissioned years ago. They are desperate, observed. They have sent everything they have, and it is not enough. Stood at his usual position, watching the same display. He did not share the commander's confidence. He could not forget the briefing from the xenobiology team. He could not stop thinking about the soldier in the medical bay, haunted by a dying child's smile. "Commander," he said carefully, "the council files indicated that humans fight differently when they are protecting something they love. There is behind them. Their families are behind them. They may not behave as we expect." "They will behave like prey," replied. "Prey that has mustered its courage for one final stand. We will crush them here, and the human species will learn its place." He opened a fleet-wide channel. "All vessels prepare for battle. Standard engagement formation. Target their larger ships first. We will break their fleet and then move on there." The armada began to move. 12 warships, each one a fortress of metal and fire, arranged themselves in the combat formation that had shattered dozens of fleets before. Energy weapons charged. Missile bays opened. Fighter craft launched from docking bays, swarming around the larger vessels like angry insects. The human fleet did not advance. They held their position, waiting, watching. Their formation was tight and disciplined, smaller ships clustered around the larger ones. "They are afraid to engage," one of his officers said. "They see our strength and hesitate." "Then we will bring the battle to them," leaned forward in his chair. "All vessels advance, full combat speed." The fleet surged forward. They crossed half the distance to the human formation before the first shots were fired. long-range missiles from the human vessels streaking across the void toward their targets. The point defense systems activated, filling space with interceptor fire. Most of the missiles were destroyed. A few got through, striking shields and armor, causing minor damage. Minimal impact, the weapons officer reported. Their missiles are inferior to our defenses. Continue advance, close to energy weapon range. The fleets drew closer. More missiles were exchanged. Shields flickered under the assault but held strong. Human ships began taking damage. Their shields were weaker, their armor thinner. A converted cargo vessel took a direct hit and broke apart, debris spinning into the darkness. Smiled. This was how battles were supposed to go. Superior force meeting inferior force, with the inevitable result. Then the human fleet began to move. They did not retreat as expected. They advanced. The entire formation surged forward, closing the distance at maximum acceleration. Ships that were already damaged, trailing fire and venting atmosphere, came with the rest. They did not fall back to repair. They did not attempt to escape. They simply accelerated toward the armada as if death was not a consideration. "They are charging us," the tactical officer said, surprise evident in his voice. "Commander, they are." His words were cut off by the impact of the first human boarding craft. The battle became chaos in an instant. Human vessels had launched hundreds of boarding pods during their charge, small craft, each carrying a squad of soldiers, rocketing toward the ships at speeds that should have been suicidal. Point defense systems engaged, destroying many of them, but there were too many to stop. Dozens of pods struck the hull of the flagship alone, breaching armor, disgorging soldiers into the corridors. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Reports flooded in from every section. Human soldiers were everywhere, fighting with a ferocity that explanation. They moved in small teams, striking hard and fast, then disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They used explosive devices without regard for their own safety. They advanced into defensive positions that should have been impregnable. And they did not stop. Made his way to the command deck through corridors that had become battlefields. Twice he encountered human boarding teams. Both times he was forced to fight through them. What he saw in those brief encounters would haunt him forever. The humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They absorbed wounds that should have killed them and kept coming. They used their bodies as weapons, tackling soldiers even when they were unarmed. One human, a woman with half her face burned away by plasma fire, grabbed a rifle and turned it on its owner before being cut down by supporting fire. Another, a man missing his left arm below the elbow, continued to fight with a combat knife in his remaining hand until he bled out. They did not surrender. They did not hesitate. They seemed to welcome death as long as they could take enemies with them. I reached the command deck to find it in disarray. Several stations were damaged. Officers lay wounded or dead at their posts, stood at the center of the chaos, shouting orders, trying to maintain control of a battle that was spiraling beyond comprehension. "The Relentless has been destroyed," a communication officer reported, his voice cracking. "The Unconquerable is requesting emergency support. They have humans on multiple decks. The Triumph is—" He stopped, staring at his screen. "The Triumph is no longer responding." His composure cracked for the first time. "3 ships. We have lost 3 ships." "Commander, the human vessels. They are not retreating even when critically damaged. They are continuing to engage. Several of them are on collision courses with our remaining ships." This showed what the officer meant. A human destroyer, its hull torn open by multiple hits, its bridge visibly destroyed, was still moving under power. It was heading directly for the cruiser Dominance. There was no way the destroyer could survive much longer. Its power core was failing. Its weapons were offline, but it kept coming. "Destroy it," screamed. Every weapon on the Dominance opened fire on the incoming wreck. Plasma bolts and missiles tore into the human ship, ripping away what remained of its hull, exposing decks and compartments to the vacuum of space. But the destroyer did not stop. It did not slow. With its last reserves of power, it adjusted its course and slammed directly into the Dominance's midsection. Both ships died together in a flash of light that briefly the distant stars. I watched in horror. They knew they were going to die, he said quietly. The crew of that ship. They knew they were dead the moment their bridge was destroyed, but they stayed at their posts. They piloted a corpse of a ship into our fleet. Why? Why would they do that? No one answered. There was no answer that made sense by standards. The battle on the ground was even worse. Station had become for the second time. Human had punched through the air defense network, landing thousands of soldiers on the station's outer hull. These were not civilians with improvised weapons. These were trained Marines, equipped with military-grade armor and weapons, fighting with the cold efficiency of professionals. But they were still human, and that meant they still fought like humans. Captain led the defense of the station's central hub. He had survived the first battle for Station. He had thought he understood what humans were capable of. He had been wrong. The human Marines advanced through the corridors in waves. The first wave would engage the defensive positions, taking casualties, pinning down the defenders. The second wave would flank, finding side passages, maintenance tunnels, any route that would let them get behind the lines. The third wave would finish the job. It was brutal, efficient, and utterly relentless. Watched a human sergeant lead a charge against his position. The sergeant had been shot twice already, once in the shoulder, once in the leg. He was limping badly. Blood soaked his uniform. He should have been in a medical bay, not on the front lines. Instead, he was charging directly into fire, his weapon blazing, his voice raised in a wordless roar that echoed through the corridors. The sergeant killed 3 soldiers before he finally fell. And as he died, he threw himself forward, using his body to shield a wounded comrade long enough for other humans to drag him to safety. That was when understood. The humans were not fighting to win this battle. They were fighting to win the war. Every sacrifice, every death was part of a larger strategy. They would spend their lives like currency, buying time, buying ground, buying the eventual defeat of the Dominion. And they had more lives to spend than had soldiers. He ordered a retreat. His troops fell back through the station, trying to establish new defensive lines. But everywhere they went, the humans followed. They seemed to know the station better than they probably did, realized. Many of them had family who had lived here, died here. In one corridor, he found a human medic operating on herself. She had taken shrapnel to the abdomen and was sitting against a wall, her hands inside her own body, removing pieces of metal. Her face was pale and slick with sweat, but her expression was calm, focused. She glanced up as squad approached, then went back to her work as if enemy soldiers were merely an inconvenience. One of soldiers raised his weapon. The medic looked at him and said something in her language. Did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. It was a challenge, a dare. She was telling them to shoot her if they wanted to, but she was not going to stop what she was doing. Ordered his squad to keep moving. He did not want to know what would happen if they killed her. He did not want to see what other humans would do in response. Back in space, the battle was reaching its climax. The fleet had been reduced to 7 ships, then 5, then 3. Human vessels, equally battered, continued to press the attack. Both sides were bleeding, dying, losing everything. But the humans did not stop. Stood on a command deck that was half in ruins. Fires burned in the corners. Smoke filled the air. His officers were dead or wounded. I stood beside him, blood trickling from a head wound, watching with eyes that held no hope. Order the retreat, I said. We must withdraw. We can regroup, reinforce. I will not retreat from prey, snarled. I will not. A massive impact shook the ship. The lights flickered. A damage report scrolled across the remaining active screens. The flagship's main engines were offline. Their shields were failing. A human boarding team had reached the power core and was attempting to overload it. "Commander," a weak voice came from the communication station. One of the junior officers had crawled back to his post, despite injuries that would have killed most beings. "I am receiving transmissions from our other ships. The Vengeance has surrendered. The Fury has surrendered. Captain says he will not. He will not send more soldiers to die against these creatures." Stared at the screen. Surrendered. Warships had surrendered. It was unthinkable, impossible. In 10,000 years of Dominion history, no vessel had ever surrendered to an enemy. Until now. "They are breaking," I said quietly. "Not the humans, Commander, us, we are breaking." The final assault came an hour later. Human Marines stormed the bridge of the flagship, cutting through what remained of the defensive forces. Drew his sidearm and fought with the desperation of a cornered predator. He killed 2 humans before a third brought him down with a shot to the leg. He lay on the deck of his own command center, surrounded by the bodies of his officers, watching as humans secured the room. They moved with professional efficiency, checking corners, tending to their wounded, establishing a perimeter. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They simply did the work that needed to be done. A human officer approached. She was young, with short hair and hard eyes. Her armor was scorched and dented. Blood, human and both, stained her hands. "Fleet Commander," she said in heavily accented, "by the authority of the United Earth Coalition, I am placing you under arrest for crimes against humanity. You will be held for trial." Laughed. It was a broken sound filled with bitterness and disbelief. "You should kill me. Your people died by the thousands. Your station was taken. You should want revenge." The human officer looked at him for a long moment. Her expression did not change. "Revenge would be easy," she said. "Justice is harder. We choose justice." She turned to her soldiers. "Get him to the medical bay. Keep him alive." As they carried him away, past the old intelligence officer was sitting against a wall, his wounds bandaged by human medics, his eyes fixed on some distant point. "You were right," said his voice barely a whisper. "The Council's warning, you were right." I did not look at him. He was watching the humans as they worked, efficient, disciplined, unstoppable. They had taken losses that would have broken any force. They had fought through wounds that should have killed them. And now that the battle was over, they were not collapsing or celebrating. They were already preparing for what came next. "I was right," agreed, "but I did not understand the full truth until now." He finally turned to face, and his eyes held something that the commander had never seen in them before. Wonder, perhaps, or fear, or both. "They do not stop," I said. "We knew that, we were warned, but I did not understand what it meant until I watched them fight." He gestured toward the humans moving through the ruined command deck. "They do not stop because stopping is not in their nature. They are persistence predators. They evolved to chase prey until it collapsed from exhaustion, and now they have turned that instinct toward war." He shook his head slowly. "We thought we were the predators. We thought they were prey. We were wrong. They are something else entirely, something the galaxy has never seen before." Closed his eyes. He did not want to hear any more. He did not want to think about what this defeat meant for the Dominion, for his people, for the future. But it continued anyway, his voice soft and filled with a terrible certainty. "They will keep coming. That is who they are. That is what they do. They will keep coming even while bleeding, even while dying, even when victory seems impossible. And they will not stop until they have achieved what they set out to achieve." He paused. "We were warned. We should have listened. Now the entire galaxy will learn what happens when you give humans a reason to fight." Outside the shattered viewports, the wreckage of 2 fleets drifted in the silence of space. Human and ships, broken and burning, mixed together in a graveyard of metal and ice. The battle was over, but for the Dominion, the real consequences were only just beginning. The humans had won, and they had done it the only way they knew how. By refusing to stop. The war ended not with a final battle but with a simple transmission. It came from the Dominion High Council, broadcast on all frequencies, translated into every known language. The message was brief. The Dominion requests terms of peace with the United Earth Coalition. Across the galaxy, species who had lived under rule for centuries listened in disbelief. The Dominion did not request peace. The Dominion conquered. The Dominion demanded. The Dominion had never, in 10,000 years of expansion, asked for anything. Until now. The news spread faster than light could travel. Traders carried it to distant stations. Diplomats whispered it in the halls of the Galactic Council. Military commanders analyzed it. Politicians debated it. Historians began writing about it before it was even finished happening. The humans had done the impossible. They had broken the Dominion. Received the news in her office on Earth. She was 57 years old, with gray hair and dark skin and eyes that had seen more pain than most beings could imagine. She had been a soldier once, decades ago, before she had chosen the path of diplomacy. Her body still carried the scars of that earlier life, a limp from an old injury, a long scar on her forearm, memories that surfaced in her dreams. She had also carried, for the past 3 months, the weight of knowing that her son had died at station, had been 24 years old. He had been a teacher at the station's elementary school. He had been killed in the first assault, trying to lead his students to safety. Had watched the footage. She had seen her son die, and then she had put that grief in a box, locked it away, and continued to do her job. There would be time to mourn later. First, there was work to be done. The United Earth Coalition had chosen her to negotiate the peace. She had argued against the selection. She was too close to the tragedy, she said, too likely to let her emotions guide her decisions. The coalition had overruled her objections. They wanted her precisely because of her loss. They wanted to look across the negotiating table and see the face of a mother whose child they had killed. They wanted the Dominion to understand what they were dealing with. The negotiations were held aboard's captured flagship, now renamed the Memorial in honor of the dead of station. It was a symbol, chosen deliberately. The humans would dictate terms from the bridge of the vessel that had led the attack on their people. Arrived alone. She wore simple clothing, a dark suit, no medals or decorations. She carried no weapons, though 100 human Marines waited just outside the negotiation chamber. She walked with her limp, making no effort to hide it. Every step she took was a message. I am wounded, but I am still standing. Was waiting for her in the commander's ready room. He had been a prisoner for 8 weeks now, held in comfortable but secure quarters aboard the ship he had once commanded. His wounds had healed, but something else in him had not. His scales had lost their luster. His eyes, all 6 of them, were dull and tired. He looked like a being who had lost everything and had not yet decided whether to accept it. Entered the room and stood across the table from him. She did not sit. She did not speak. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. Human and predator, 2 beings who had lost much and would carry those losses for the rest of their lives. Finally spoke. His voice was rough, damaged by smoke inhalation during the final battle. You are the negotiator. I am ambassador. I represent the United Earth Coalition. Eyes narrowed slightly. I have read the casualty lists. There was at station a teacher. My son. The words hung in the air. His expression shifted, surprise perhaps, or something like it. They sent a mother to negotiate with the being who killed her child. They did. Why? Considered the question. She had asked herself the same thing many times. The answer, when she found it, had been simple. Because I understand what we are capable of, she said. Because I know what we have done and what we will do if pushed. And because I believe in something that you may not be able to understand. I believe in mercy. I believe in justice. I believe that we can be more than our pain, more than our anger, more than our desire for revenge. She paused. I also believe that if I fail, If these negotiations break down and war continues, there will be no mercy, no justice, only destruction, and I will not be the one who allows that to happen, not while I have a choice." Stared at her for a long time. Then he laughed. It was a strange sound, broken and tired, without any real humor in it. "Your species is insane," he said. "Truly, genuinely insane. Any other being in your position would want my blood. You have every right to demand it, and instead you speak of mercy." "Mercy is not weakness," replied. "It is strength. It takes more strength to spare an enemy than to destroy one. It takes more courage to forgive than to hate." She leaned forward slightly. "My son would have understood that. He was a teacher. He believed in the goodness of people, even when they gave him no reason to. I honor his memory by believing the same thing. Even about me, even about you." The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were long and difficult and filled with moments of tension that threatened to collapse everything. But in the end, the terms were reached. The Dominion would release all human prisoners. They would withdraw from all occupied human territories. They would pay reparations for the damage caused at Station. And they would send a message to every species under their influence, a message that herself would write. On the final day, before the treaty was signed, asked a question. They were alone in the ready room again, the documents spread before them, the weight of history pressing down on both of them. "Why?" he asked. "Not why mercy. I think I understand that now, even if I do not believe I could do the same. But why do your people keep fighting? Why do they continue even when wounded, even when dying, even when there is no hope of victory? The files we received from the Council explained your biology, your evolution, your psychology, but they did not explain why." Was quiet for a long moment. Then she rolled up her sleeve, revealing the scar that ran from her wrist to her elbow. It was old, faded to white, a memory of violence from long ago. "I received this wound when I was 23 years old," she said. "I was a soldier in a conflict that does not matter anymore. We were pinned down by enemy fire. My squad was dying around me. I took a piece of shrapnel that should have killed me." She traced the scar with her finger. "I did not die. I did not stop fighting. I crawled to cover, I applied a tourniquet with my own belt, and I provided covering fire while the rest of my squad evacuated. When it was over, the medics told me I should have been dead. They could not explain how I had continued to function." She looked up at. "I could not explain it either. Not then. But I have thought about it for 34 years, and I think I finally understand." "Tell me." "We keep fighting because someone has to," said simply. "We keep fighting because the people behind us cannot. Because if we fall forward. Because giving up is not in our nature. We were not built for surrender. We were not designed for defeat. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day of our existence, and we survived by refusing to accept that death was inevitable." She stood and walked to the viewport. Outside, the stars burned cold and distant. The wreckage of the battle had been cleared away, but she could still see it in her mind. The broken ships, the drifting bodies, the cost of war. "We crawled out of the mud," she continued, her voice soft but firm. "We survived ice ages and plagues and disasters that should have ended us. We fought predators and environments and each other. And through all of it we kept getting back up. That is who we are. That is what we do. We get knocked down and we get back up. Again and again and again." She turned to face. "You asked why we keep fighting even when bleeding, even when dying. The answer is simple: because we are human. Because our ancestors passed down to us the one gift that mattered more than strength or speed or intelligence. They passed down stubbornness. They passed down spite. They passed down the absolute, unbreakable refusal to stay down." Absorbed her words in silence. His expression was unreadable. "And what happens now?" he asked finally. "The war is over, the treaty is signed. What happens to your species and mine?" "That depends on choices that have not yet been made. The Dominion can learn from this. You can become something different than what you were. Or you can rebuild your fleets, nurse your grudges, and try again in 100 years. The expression hardened. If you choose the second path, know this: we will remember, we will prepare, and when you come for us again, you will find us waiting. She picked up the treaty documents and placed them before. Humanity offers peace to all who seek it. We do not want war. We do not seek conquest. We want to build, to explore, to grow alongside the other species of this galaxy. But if war finds us, if anyone harms our people, burns our worlds, or threatens our children, we will respond with everything we have. She leaned closer and saw something ancient and terrible in her eyes. Something that had been passed down through generations of humans who had fought and bled, and died to ensure that future generations would survive. "We will come for you," she said. "Wounded, bleeding, dying, we will keep coming. And we will not stop until the last one of us falls, and perhaps not even then, because we are human, and humans do not know how to quit." The treaty was signed, the war ended, but was not finished. At her request, the Galactic Council convened a special session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to hear the human ambassador speak. Many of them had watched the war with fear. They had seen what humans could do. They did not know what to expect from this message. Stood at the podium looking out at the assembled beings. She saw fear in their eyes, yes, but she also saw curiosity, hope, the possibility of something new. "I speak to you today not as a conqueror," she began, "but as a representative of a species that wants nothing more than to live in peace. We did not seek this war. We did not want it. But when it came to us, we faced it with everything we had." She paused. "You have seen what we can do. You have watched our soldiers fight against impossible odds. You have seen our people die rather than surrender. Some of you are afraid of us now, and I understand that fear. We can be terrifying when we need to be." Her voice softened. "But we do not want to be feared. We want to be friends, partners, members of a galactic community that works together instead of against each other. We want to trade and learn and grow alongside all of you. We want to share our music and our stories and our dreams." She looked directly at the delegation, the few representatives who had been allowed to attend. "We offer our hand in friendship to anyone who will take it, even to those who were once our enemies. We believe in second chances. We believe in redemption. We believe that every species has the potential to be something great." Her expression hardened. "But we also want to be clear about something. If anyone threatens our people again, if anyone burns our worlds, kills our children, or tries to conquer us, we will respond. Not with hatred, but with determination. Not with cruelty, but with resolve. We will protect what is ours. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves. And we will never, ever stop fighting for what we believe in." She let those words sink in before continuing. "The Dominion learned this lesson at great cost. Let their example serve as a warning to any who might be tempted to follow their path. We are not easily conquered. We are not easily broken. We are humans. We have survived everything our universe has thrown at us, and we will survive whatever comes next." She smiled then, and there was warmth in it alongside the steel. "We have so much to offer: art and science, philosophy and music, stories that span thousands of years, inventions that we would love to share. We want to be part of your community. We want to help build something wonderful together." Her final words rang through the chamber. "Humanity offers peace to all who seek it. Take our hand and we will walk into the future together. But know this: we will never kneel. We will never surrender. We will never stop being who we are, because we are human, and that means something. It has always meant something, and it always will." The speech ended. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then slowly the applause began. It came from the smaller species first, those who had lived under oppression for generations. Then it spread. More and more beings joined in, rising to their feet, acknowledging the humans who had done the impossible. Stood at the podium, accepting the applause with grace and humility. She thought of her son, who had died teaching children to read. She thought of the thousands who had given their lives at station. She thought of all the humans throughout history who had fallen but had never stopped fighting. This moment was for them, for all of them. The Galactic Council updated the human species dossier the next day. The old warnings were revised. New information was added. The classification that had once read "Observe Only" was changed. The new classification was simple. It contained only 2 words, but those words would echo through galactic history for generations to come. Do not engage. But underneath the official warning, someone had added an unofficial note. It spread through the diplomatic channels, passed from delegate to delegate, becoming something like legend. The note read, "If you must deal with humans, remember this: they are not our enemies unless we make them so. They do not seek war unless war is brought to them. But if you give them a reason to fight, if you harm what they love, they will come for you. They will keep coming, even while bleeding, even while dying. They will keep coming until the job is done, because that is who they are. That is what they do. That is what it means to be human." In her quarters aboard the Memorial, finally allowed herself to grieve. She sat in the darkness, holding a photograph of her son, and she wept. She wept for all the dead. She wept for the future that they would never see. But even through her tears, she felt something that might have been hope. They had done it. They had survived. They had won. And maybe, just maybe, the war they had ended would prevent others from starting. She looked at her son's face one last time. "We did it, sweetheart," she whispered. "We showed them what we are, and now maybe there will be peace, real peace, the kind you always believed in." She closed her eyes and let the tears fall. Outside the viewport, the stars continued their eternal dance. Somewhere out there, a galaxy was learning to see humanity in a new light, not as prey, not as monsters, but as something else entirely. As beings who would never stop fighting for what they believed in. As beings who would keep coming, even while bleeding. As humans. And that was enough. That was always enough.